There's been a problem throughout all of open source and Linux in particular for many years now, where things have become increasingly political. I mean, not just a little political, but extremely political, as in the leadership and primary contributors, and oftentimes even the executives at some of the companies related to open source have gone into very, very extremist politics to the point where they intentionally exclude people who are just average, normal people, centrists, slightly right-leaning people, or even left-leaning people, but who aren't left-leaning enough. And earlier today, the president of the United States, Donald Trump, or was this yesterday? This was a couple of hours ago. This was last night. It's been a long day. Last night, the president of the United States officially designated Antifa as a terrorist organization, as a major terrorist organization. He said, they quote, I am pleased to inform our many USA patriots that I am designating Antifa, a sick, dangerous, radical left disaster, as a major terrorist organization. I will also strongly be recommending that those funding Antifa be thoroughly investigated in accordance with the highest legal standards and practices. Thank you for your attention to this matter. Now, why are we talking about Antifa and it being a terrorist organization? Well, because quite frankly, throughout open source and Linux, those extremist politics that we've talked about have manifested themselves into people supporting Antifa. In fact, huge numbers of some of the most prominent people in Linux and open source are proudly members of Antifa. They wave the Antifa flag. They talk about being Antifa. They shout Antifa slogans. They scream them with huge amounts of vulgarities. And so that begs the question, how is Antifa officially being a terrorist organization, right? Officially, and that really means all Antifa organizations, officially being terrorist organizations. How is that going to impact outlets like, let's say, NixOS or Elementary OS or GNOME, all of whom, and many, many others, are proudly Antifa? How is this going to impact them from a legal standpoint? If they're Antifa and Antifa is a terrorist organization, doesn't that make them terrorist organizations, or at the very least, providing material support to terrorist organizations? And before I show you just some of their quotes and screenshots, just to make it very clear exactly what they say, Antifa is an organization. Rather, it is a series of organizations. Many people are out there right now saying, you can't declare Antifa a terrorist organization. It's just an idea. It means anti-fascist. What, you like fascists? Well, that means that you must be a bad guy. You're probably a Nazi. We should punch the Nazi, right? The Antifa logic is kind of going along those lines right now. People are actively trying to defend themselves for being Antifa by saying it's not an organization, it's an idea. However, as someone who's been specifically targeted by multiple Antifa chapters, including Rose City Antifa out in Oregon, I would like to point out a couple of things. Chapters of Antifa have, among other things, email addresses, social media accounts, physical locations, scheduled meetings, training sessions, equipment and equipment logs, membership lists, membership verification processes, online forums and chat rooms, and in many cases, fundraisers and merchandise. That is that is literally just everything you can possibly think of to define an organization. And these are organizations, right? There's no other way to look at it. You can't say Antifa is just an idea. It's an idea with contact information and physical meeting locations and physical addresses and PO boxes and selling merchandise and membership lists. Come on. That's an organization, right? These are organizations, and there's many Antifa organizations and chapters throughout the United States. And some of them are, very closely interwoven, and some of them are very loosely knit, but they are distinct organizations. Now, with that out of the way, let's talk for a minute about the overlap between Antifa and Linux specifically. We could get into this and it becoming a huge topic if we loop in all of open source. But let's specifically talk about Linux for the moment. Many of you will remember the NixOS purge. You guys remember the NixOS purge from last summer? This was when NixOS, the Linux distribution, packaging system, and all that sort of thing, they decided to commit what they called a purge. They used that word over and over again, of undesirables. They called it the Nazi purge, meaning, and Nazi in this case, not meaning actual Nazis. That meant anyone who was a centrist, anyone who was a conservative, anyone who was a public religious person, anyone who was not actively advocating for trans issues. Like, it was a very... Basically, anyone who wasn't an extreme leftist was declared a Nazi, and they committed a purge of them. So they kicked people out. They even kicked out the founder of NixOS. It was crazy. They wrote an abdication letter for him and forced him to sign it. It was the stupidest and weirdest thing. But many of the people within NixOS, including the one you see on the screen right now, this is a guy that goes by the name of Hexa, who is a member of the security team for NixOS, a member of the build infrastructure team for NixOS, and was a moderator for NixOS during the purge, regularly posts about how he is Antifa. He posts the Antifa flag and flies the Antifa flag, and he's not alone. A huge number of NixOS highest level contributors do the same thing. They fly the Antifa flag. In essence, NixOS is an Antifa Linux distribution. That's not criticizing its technical merits. I understand why someone would like NixOS from a technical and usability point of view. But the organization behind it is an Antifa sympathetic organization. So that's one Antifa Linux distro. Then there's Elementary OS, who regularly posts about Antifa related stuff and in support of Antifa. And when the dude who likes to wear dresses saw the president of the United States officially designating Antifa a terrorist organization, he responded to that by saying, "Welp, see you guys in prison, I guess," because he considers himself Antifa. And as far as I can tell, he considers Elementary OS, the Linux distribution, to be Antifa as well. And that's not even the worst of it. Realistically, the most intense version of this that I've seen is from GNOME, specifically the GNOME Foundation. If you go to gnome.org, they have an entire blog post up about how, quote, GNOME beep Nazis, GNOME is Antifa. That was written by one of their most prolific contributors, a person who writes a number of their release announcements. They make these big, pretty release announcements. Look really nice. With big screenshots. They write like regular weekly reports of what's happening in GNOME. And this guy writes a lot of that stuff. He's kind of one of their spokespeople. And on the gnome.org website itself, he posted that GNOME is Antifa. Direct quote. Okay, well, when that happened, and that was some months back, I raised this issue to the GNOME Foundation. I'm like, are you guys sure you want to be identifying as Antifa? Now, obviously, the GNOME Foundation did not respond to me because GNOME Foundation. They did, however, hop all over social media to reinforce that, yes, they were agreeing with this. They were not deleting this. They were not taking it offline. And that was just how that was going to stay. Okay, so they're really doubling down that GNOME is Antifa. The most prominently used, by far, the most used desktop environment in the Linux world is GNOME, and their foundation, their legal foundation, is Antifa. by their words. Holy heavens. So what does that mean exactly? Right? Like, what exactly does that mean? And I don't know as yet. And this is just off the top of my head. I'm sitting down and I'm compiling a very large list of prominent individuals, open source organizations, big tech companies, and whatnot, who are making public statements about their support of Antifa or how they are part of Antifa. So if any of you see this sort of thing, across social media, forums, matrix channels, IRC, Discord, websites, wherever you see it, screenshot that puppy and get it over to me. There's a couple of ways you can contact me on that. You can go to lunduke.com. You can find my email address there, or you can just go over to X and send me a direct private message on X. Either way works just fine, but get that on over to me. I'm cataloging as much of that as possible, because we need to document this stuff. And it's worth noting that a lot of times when prominent individuals within Linux and open source and big tech make these sorts of statements, there is a bit of blowback, right? When they come out and say something wild and crazy like, I am Antifa, there's blowback, and then they eventually delete those posts, right? Because they don't want to lose their jobs or something like that. Screenshot. You can't let them forget it, right? You can't let them bury that. If you see it in their forums, screenshot, send that on over. I'm cataloging all the screenshots, all the documentation around it, and I will be contacting a number of individuals, including law enforcement, related to it, because it's a terrorist organization. And if it's going to be a terrorist organization, well, heck, we're gonna treat it as such. Now, does that mean that you all should go out there and immediately stop using any software made by any of these people? That's up to you guys, man. That's totally up to you how you want to handle that. I'm not going to tell anyone what software to use or not to use. I'm not like these folks where, I have to force people to pass some sort of purity test in order to use or contribute to software. Use the software you want to use. But if leaders are out there in the open source world pushing terrorist propaganda, I'm going to at the very least shine a big old spotlight on it. That's my power. That's all I can do is shine the spotlight on it. And I'm sure as heck going to do that. Thank you to the Lunduke Journal subscribers. Go over to lunduke.com. Look at that. It's all over there. Look at that beautiful webpage. Go to lunduke.com. Those of you listening to the podcast, you can't see the webpage, but it's great. You know what it looks like. You can listen and read and watch everything from the Lunduke Journal absolutely for free. Thanks to all the subscribers over at the Lunduke Journal, which you can find more information about how to become a subscriber, which is probably the best thing you can do in life, over at lunduke.com. Not the best thing. It's a top 10 for sure. And again, thank you to everyone for making the Lunduke Journal what it absolutely is. In fact, you know what? Thank you to GNOME and Elementary and NixOS and all of these other super Antifa organizations, because every single time these Antifa, pro-Antifa organizations have come out and they're like, don't talk to Lunduke, ban Lunduke, you can't say the word Lunduke or you'll get banned. Every time that happens, boom, subscriptions skyrocket. People flood into the Lunduke Journal. They're like, seriously? These unhinged, crazy people in open source are saying this stuff? And so they come on into the Lunduke Journal. Every single time they ignore the Lunduke Journal, the number of viewers goes up. Fantastic. Great. Do that job for me, GNOME Foundation. Continue ignoring me. Continue spouting your Antifa propaganda, and we'll just see how that goes for you. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, nerds and nerdettes across the inner tubes, I do declare, end broadcast.